dust settles. Then two curved claws break through packed earth at first light. A honey badger drags itself out of a burrow it dug the night before, a broad silver-white mantle rolling loose over its shoulders as it stretches. It weighs barely 12 kilograms, and almost nothing in this stretch of savanna outweighs its willingness to find that out the hard way. 6 feet from the burrow mouth, a puff adder lies coiled in the grass, exactly where it settled at midnight. The badger walks straight over it, unhurried, already thinking about breakfast. The puff adder strikes once, catches skin along the shoulder, and gets nothing for it. A honey badger's hide runs almost half an inch thick across the back, loose enough that the animal can twist inside its own skin when something bites down, and dense enough that a snake's fangs rarely reach anything that matters. The badger shakes off the strike the way another animal might shake off rain and keeps walking toward a termite mound, already humming with movement at the edge of the open grassland. A troop of banded mongooses works the base of it, a dozen of them digging in short bursts, and every one of them scatters the moment the badger's shadow crosses the mound. This is the first law of the badger's day. It does not ask who got there first. Follow this series for the next verdict the savanna hands down. A creature built like this one, built to walk into anything and pay for it later, needs close to 1 kilogram of food every single day just to keep moving, and there is no efficient way to find that much food, except to take shortcuts other animals have already dug. The mongoose troop regroups 30 meters off, chittering, watching the badger finish digging out the burrow they had already half opened for it. The badger doesn't so much as glance at them. 10 minutes later, it has widened their tunnel into something twice the size, flattened the soft dirt at the entrance, and abandoned it without ever going inside. The digging itself was the only thing it wanted, whatever insects and rodents the disturbance flushed out along the way. By mid-morning, the sun sits high and flat over the open savanna, and the badger is already 3 kilometers from where it woke up, moving in the loose, tireless walk that will carry it 8 kilometers or more before dark. The hard light strips every shadow down to nothing, and the heat pushes most of the savanna into whatever shade it can find, not the badger. It works a patch of cracked ground with both front claws, unearthing something small and pale, and a scorpion the length of a finger lashes its tail across the badger's nose before it disappears down the badger's throat. Sting and all. A sting like that would drop an animal 5 times its size in under a minute. The badger sneezes once, blinks, and keeps digging, working through 6 more scorpions and a fat white grub before it even straightens up again. 20 meters off, in the dappled shade of a marula grove, a lone leopard lifts its head and watches for a long moment before lowering it again. A leopard could kill a honey badger in under 4 seconds. Almost none of them try. The badger has a reputation that travels faster than it does, built on old fights nobody survived describing in detail, and reputation is doing more work here than teeth ever could. Its path crosses a shallow muddy waterhole next, cracked clay banks giving way to churned water where a herd of Cape buffalo stands shoulder to shoulder against the heat, dozens of them stretching back toward the haze. A scatter of red-billed oxpeckers works the herd's backs and ears, and for once the badger has no interest in any of it. Buffalo are the one animal on this stretch of savanna, large enough that even a honey badger keeps its distance, and it skirts the water's edge instead, cutting toward drier ground. The badger finds a second burrow before noon, this one recently abandoned by a warthog family that moved out after the mud dried too hard to keep cool inside. A young warthog, barely 8 weeks old, still lingers at the entrance out of habit, uncertain where its mother went. The badger doesn't chase it off. It simply starts widening the tunnel, throwing dirt backward between its hind legs in steady arcs, and the warthog gives ground without a fight, because giving ground is the only strategy that has ever worked against this animal. Then the calling starts. A pair of yellow-billed hornbills lands in a dead acacia 40 meters up the badger's path. and they do not stop calling. Every hornbill call pulls the badger's head up, and every time the badger changes direction toward the sound, something in the grass ahead scatters before it arrives. A francolin bursts up. Insects lift off in a cloud. The whole strip of ground turns over just before the badger reaches it. The hornbills are not warning anyone. They are working the badger like a plow, staying 20 or 30 meters ahead of it, feeding on whatever it flushes into the open along the way. The badger has spent an entire morning being led without ever noticing. It never once slows down to question why the same two birds keep reappearing overhead. That is the version of the day the badger would tell if it kept score. But the ledger the Savannah is actually keeping runs a great deal longer than that. By early afternoon, a pair of black-backed jackals has joined the procession too, trailing 40 meters back near a dry riverbed, patient in the way only scavengers can afford to be. They have followed this particular badger before. They know its route better than it does, because they have nothing else to track today. And a honey badger digging through open ground for 6 straight hours turns up more free meals than a pair of jackals could find on their own in a week. The badger reaches a fallen marula tree just after 2 in the afternoon, and beneath the rotted trunk it finds what it actually came for: a wild bee colony, thick with honeycomb, already agitated by the vibration of the badger's approach. The badger tears into the wood with both forepaws, and within seconds it is coated in bees, dozens of them, stinging every exposed patch of skin they can reach along its face and paws, the only places the loose hide runs thin enough to matter. The badger does not stop. It does not even slow down. Bee venom builds in an ordinary animal until it becomes lethal, and a badger absorbing this many stings in one sitting should, by every reasonable measure, be in serious trouble within the hour. It keeps eating comb by the mouthful instead, wax and larvae and all, working through pain that would send most mammals running for open water. This is the moment the badger's whole reputation is built on, and it is also the moment that reveals what the reputation actually costs everyone else today. Every one of today's raids has followed the same pattern. The mongoose troop lost a half-dug burrow. The warthog family lost a den it still wanted back. The hornbills spent their whole afternoon flushing food they never got to keep. The badger never negotiates with any of them. It simply moves through, takes what the ground offers, and lets everyone else absorb whatever is left of the cost. Nothing gets paid back. That's the debt this whole series keeps returning to. The jackals close the last 30 meters, while the badger is still buried in the wreckage of the hive, driven off its guard by pain and honey both. They dart in fast, snatch loose chunks of dripping comb scattered in the grass, and vanish again before the badger even lifts its head. It is the only theft that goes the other direction all day, and it only happens because the badger, for once, is too busy hurting to notice anything around it. By the time the badger backs out from under the trunk, swollen along one side of its face, close to half the honeycomb is gone, and it barely seems to register the difference. It licks a torn paw, shakes off a final cluster of bees still clinging to its shoulder, and turns away from the tree without looking back at what it leaves behind. Nothing in this stretch of Savannah keeps books on what the badger owes. It has simply never had to pay. Not once. Not today. Late in the afternoon, the light turns hard and gold over a granite kopje rising from the plain, and the badger crosses paths with the pride of a dozen lions resting in its shade, cubs sprawled between the adults. An old male lifts its head, tracks the badger's approach with something close to wariness, and doesn't rise. A lion outweighs a honey badger by a factor of 20 and could end the encounter in under 2 seconds. It doesn't. The badger passes within 10 meters of the pride, and neither party acknowledges the other, because both of them already know how this particular standoff would end for whichever side started it. That single detail says more about the badger's day than anything it actually killed. Its power was never really about size or teeth. It was about being the one animal in this landscape that nothing has yet found a reason to test twice, and every other animal here has learned that lesson secondhand without ever needing to test it themselves. As the sun drops toward the horizon, the badger circles back roughly toward the burrow it left 12 hours earlier, though it has covered close to 9 kilometers by now and shows no sign of slowing. A clan of spotted hyenas moves along the same ridge in loose file, drawn by the scent of honey still clinging to the badger's fur. And for a moment, 3 very different appetites occupy the same strip of ground without a single confrontation between any of them. The badger digs a fresh burrow for the night, rather than return to the old one, the way it almost always does, abandoning tunnels the way it abandons everything else it has already used up. Somewhere behind it, in the fading light, the mongoose troop will finish opening the burrow. The badger interrupted this morning. The warthog family may or may not reclaim what's left of their den by dark. The jackals will sleep well tonight on stolen honey. They never had to dig for themselves. The new burrow sits barely 200 meters from the marula tree and its ruined hive, close enough that the badger can still smell honey on its own fur as it curls into the dirt. Above the burrow mouth, vultures settle into a dead acacia for the night. And somewhere past the ridge, the mongoose troop finally finishes the tunnel the badger started for them this morning, 12 of them packing into a burrow that was never really theirs to begin with. Borrowed the same way, everything the badger touches eventually gets borrowed out here, without asking and without ever paying it back. None of that changes tomorrow. The badger will wake at first light, walk over the next thing that tries to stop it, and the Savannah will keep making room for it, not because it has forgiven the badger anything it took today, but because nothing out here has worked out a cheaper way to survive being in its path.